Hello, everyone. This is Jim Renacci, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Buckeye War Room. For those of you that don't know who I am, I was a former United States Congressman for 8 years in Washington. Also a business person here in this great state of Ohio for over 30 years. I also was the Republican Senate candidate in 2018. So when it comes to Ohio and Washington, I do have some knowledge, but not enough. That's why I keep bringing in these special guests. And today, I'm happy to have an interesting guest. He actually pretty much is heard most of the time down in the southwest, actually it'd be the southeastern part of Ohio. Tom Roten has discussed politics, current events, and controversial issues on the #1 radio show in Southeast Ohio and Northwest West Virginia. He is known for and built a reputation of holding politicians and government officials accountable, which we need more of. You can hear him on the Tom Roten Show at TOMROTENSHOW.com. That's Tom Roten Show, TOMROTENSHOW.com. Tom, welcome to the Buckeye War Room.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be on with you, and it was always great to have you on my old radio program and on the Tom Roten Show. It's always good to hear your voice and get your expertise. So now you've kind of flipped it on me. I'm not used to this.
Well, we're going to talk about a number of things, and you've been around enough too as well, especially when it comes to Ohio, to realize that when you look back on 2024 and looking ahead in 2025, it's amazing. It's really amazing. No one expected Ohio to become so much of a red state, which used Republican wins in elections this fall. But I will tell you what's interesting. We're not as red as people think. You know, we only have about 20% Republican, 20% Democrat, and 60% independent. So the independents really came on board when it came to Republicans and said, we've had enough of Democrats, and pushed the needle. What are your thoughts?
I think Ohio, much like West Virginia, may have a majority of Republicans, but not a majority of conservatives. And so they're very similar in the fact that both West Virginia and Ohio made Republican gains, added to the supermajorities and all that. But it's yet to be seen, and hopefully 2025 will manifest who the real conservatives are. And that's really what it boils down to. You have a lot of people who, for whatever reason, they may have switched the letter beside their name, but they have not switched their ideology. And I think, Donald Trump has had a lot to do with that, both in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky as well, in this whole region, that he has gotten a lot of people to come over to his label. Now, whether it remains to be seen that they will support the MAGA agenda, a conservative agenda, I don't know. But I am happy for Ohio becoming more of a red state. I mean, when you consider, Jim, that just a year ago that Ohio voters, approved a constitutional amendment for abortion by 57%, and then a year later, Ohio becomes even more red. That's pretty interesting.
It certainly is, and it shows you that voters are making choices depending on what they hear. It also shows you in many cases voters sometimes don't really have all the information, because those same voters, if they really knew what the constitutional amendment was doing, probably would not have voted for it in such a large majority. Yeah,
I agree. And really the other side used the same argument that you just did on the gerrymandering issue one for this year. So, that maybe it wasn't explained well enough or worded well enough. I don't know. But, maybe we ought to give voters credit. I think that they probably did not want this, unelected board deciding the districts. As far as a year ago with the abortion amendment, I think a lot of that was just the outside money.
100% agree. By the way, I'm going to ask you a question, that I was asked on a podcast, but I'm going to give you my answer first, and so that you're not thrown off guard. I was asked, are you MAGA? And I said, I'm a conservative MAGA. And somebody said to me, well, And on this podcast, he said, well, what does that mean? That means you don't support Trump? I go, no, I support Trump. I support making America greater in a conservative way, not a populist way. So there are things that I disagree with the current president. And so are you MAGA?
Well, I would probably answer more like you, Jim. And it's been said for years that the Republican Party, I'm talking about the RNC, had to be a big tent. I'm almost wondering if MAGA is not an even bigger tent. I mean, when you look at some of the appointments, when you look at some of the people who have gotten behind this movement, it includes, just look at Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, a former U.S. congressman on the Democrat side who ran for the 2020 nomination for president as a Democrat. So, I mean, you're talking about a variety, a wide variety of people who have gotten involved in this MAGA movement, and whether their motives are pure and they really want to make America great again through conservative values and ideology, that remains to be seen.
Well, it's interesting you brought Tulsi Gabbard up, because I can tell you that I have been opposed to her nomination. But here's the reason I explain it. I served with Tulsi. I can tell you that she voted for every liberal idea and consequence there was. She was a 100% supporter of Nancy Pelosi. I got, when somebody said to me when I was running for governor, well, you supported transgender bathrooms. I never supported transgender bathrooms, but I will tell you, she was a signer of that bill. She was a co-sponsor of that bill. So if you look at everything she supported, you would never call her a Republican. And now she's going to be an integral part of the Republican administration.
Yeah. Well, and I might cut her some slack on maybe what she's been through with the TSA and so forth, and now having the opportunities to turn the tables on that. I find that very interesting. She is a likable person. She does seem to have come around on some things, so I could probably cut her some slack. But it's hard to get this out of my mind. This is somebody who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and like you said, voted for Pelosi for Speaker. That's hard to put aside, but there again, maybe she's coming around.
Well, my problem is I lived in Washington for 8 years. I understand the policies and the politics, and too often people move in a direction that gets them further ahead than moving in the right direction because it's better for the people. So that's my fear, and I could list a few other picks. I mean, Tulsi's one of them. Robert Kennedy, no Republican would ever, I shouldn't say that. There are some Republicans that would have voted for him, but the majority, probably 90%, would never have voted for him for president. Now he's going to have a pretty significant role. So it's interesting, some of the people that he's bringing into his appointments, and we got to look at them and say, wow, what is MAGA? And it's one of the reasons why, to be a pure MAGAlist, or whatever you want to call it, I mean, you have to be open to just about everything, including things you might not have been open to a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, I like to say it this way on my podcast. I'm just looking for a little consistency. And quite honestly, I'm not seeing a whole lot of consistency with the picks of Donald Trump. I mean, you mentioned RFK Jr., and I would say this. I could never have voted for him for president. I've never been somebody who would see myself chained to a tree to save the planet, or whatever the crazy kind of things that he did in the past. However, I have followed him in recent years when it comes to questioning things like vaccines, food ingredients, and things like that. And I've been 100% behind what he's been talking about. And not only that, but I'm pretty excited about, his position as HHS secretary, as long as he stays in his lane. I think Trump's made that pretty clear. He said, Bobby's not touching the fracking and all that. So as long as he stays away from that kind of stuff and stays in the lane of making America healthy again, I'm all for that.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, there are pieces that I would support too, But there are probably things that Nancy Pelosi supported that you or I probably supported as well. You would not never put Nancy Pelosi in a position of power. And that's what's scary about some of these picks. But look, here's the one thing I will tell you. The president got elected. He got elected. By the way, I had a friend of mine say, he got elected with a mandate. Well, so did Biden. And the guy looked at me and said, Biden didn't get elected. Yes, he did. Biden had 302 electoral college votes. But that didn't give him the right, in many ways, to do certain things. So mandates don't mean anything. I think the goal here is that President Trump got elected overwhelmingly because people are fed up and tired of the federal government and the federal system. Mm-hmm. And I'm just hoping that this hodgepodge of people that he's putting in place do take care of that, change that system. They don't have a lot of time, but I'm hoping that's what they work together to do in their positions.
Yeah. I put together a little list here of the good and bad, and it's very inconsistent. And I think one of the most glaring ones is the NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. I really like this guy, and I'm a health freedom guy. I have been ever since the beginning of this whole COVID thing, and even before. But here's a guy, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He opposed the lockdowns from the beginning, and he was censored on Twitter before Elon got it, censored on Facebook. Now, here's the ironic thing and the very inconsistent thing. So he's set to be the NIH director. The Surgeon General, Trump's pick for Surgeon General, is Dr. Jeanette Nesheiwat. She was pro-censorship. She actually went on Fox News talking about, she was praising Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook for censoring what she called misinformation when it came to COVID stuff, and urged other social media entities to do the same thing. So here she is in one position. Dr. J's in this other position. He was actually censored, and she's bragging about it. I mean, she was pro-COVID vax and so forth. Now, maybe she's come around. I don't know, but it's kind of like what you said about Pelosi. Are there not other people that you could choose from who were right from the beginning?
I would agree with you. And you know what? Pam Bondi, the new attorney general pick. Now, I was not aware of this because I know Pam Bondi. I'm a supporter of hers. But I also did not realize until I got a phone call that she's very supportive of red flag laws and confiscating your guns. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Now you're putting in her position where she could do things that, I mean, once I learned that, I said, wow, that's an interesting position to put an attorney general pick in.
I like to call her bump stock ban Bondi, because not only was she in favor of red flag laws as Florida's attorney general, but also in favor of bump stock bans, which Trump was too. And he tried to do that by executive order, even after Obama realized he couldn't. And thankfully, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned that. But yeah, it's very inconsistent. I mean, that MAGA supporters are pro 2A. I mean, they're gun supporters. And so to put Pam Bondi in this position is very questionable. I tell you another one that's questionable, and this one was a little more recent, and worked with Bondi as a sheriff in Florida, the head of the DEA, Trump's pick for DEA. Now, this guy, maybe he's going to be good on drug enforcement. I don't know. But he made a big announcement on March 30th, 2020. And it was of this huge takedown of this criminal, a pastor by the name of Dr. Ronald Howard Brown from the River at Tampa Bay Church. He arrested this guy for defying health orders and opening his church. Don't we have the First Amendment? Am I missing something here?
No, you're not. I mean, again, this is what's interesting about some of these picks. Exactly. You look at their history, you look at, and by the way, I don't think all of us, I'm the best example. Well, I did not know that about Pam Bondi, that she was that much aggressively against guns, where she would confiscate them. So, I mean, I think we all have to learn that some of these picks have some issues that, we all need to be much more aware of, instead of just carte blanche supporting everyone that Trump brings forward.
Right, right. Now, listen, I will say there's a couple other good ones I really like. Border Czar Tom Homan. I had an opportunity to interview him, met him in D.C. at an event there for Federation of American Immigration Reform. Very good guy there. And I believe, he's no nonsense. He doesn't care what the press says. He's just going to go do it. I hope he follows through on that. As I said, I'm a health freedom guy, Jim, as you know, and I'm pretty happy about the FDA commissioner pick, Dr. Marty Makary, John Hopkins professor. He questioned Fauci and the COVID narrative from the beginning. I think also EPA administrator, guy that I guess you served with, and former Congressman Lee Zeldin. We can get rid of these EV mandates, drill baby drill. I'm all for that as well, and I think Zeldin will be for it.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some very good picks. Some of the other ones, you go down the line. Department of the Transportation Secretary I served with. He's an interesting pick. I don't know what his background is that would give him the credibility, but he's a good guy, good supporter of Trump and hopefully those policies. How about the Education Secretary? What are your thoughts there? I mean, she actually served in the Trump's previous administration and the Small Business administration. Now she's Education Secretary. Kind of an interesting turn for her.
Well, she was in the WWE business, I believe. So maybe she'll body slam the Department of Ed and let's just get rid of it. I mean, I don't know if she needs a tag team partner or not, but hopefully somebody will help her and we can just end the Department of Ed. Congressman Massey over in Kentucky has had that proposal to end the Department of Ed. I think he's introduced it every year here the last few years. So maybe we can see that actually happen and just get this back where it belongs, to the states. So that would be huge. I want to bring up another one here, Jim, the pick for Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. This is a Soros guy. He worked for Soros. That seems kind of odd. The fact that he has a husband and a couple of kids just does not have a MAGA feel to me. I don't think most MAGA people who are 100% Trump, that they would have thought they would be getting as Treasury Secretary a Soros guy and a proponent of the LGBTQ agenda.
Wow, and see, I was not aware of that. I knew he was a Soros guy. I did not know he was a proponent. And again, this is the reason why it just can't be a carte blanche. When I talk to MAGA people, they say, oh, it's terrible that you're questioning any one of his picks. Trump should get every pick he wants. Well, I think if the system and the Constitution works properly, Trump should propose anybody he wants, and the Senate should, either confirm them or not confirm them. So it's interesting as you learn more about these. And by the way, we're going to learn a lot about them because each one of these will have to go through a Senate confirmation.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't big on Dr. Oz when he ran for Senate, and I'm not real big on him being the administrator for CMMS either. I mean, this guy was another pro-COVID vax guy, believed in the narrative from the beginning. He's also, oddly enough, been pro-transgender surgery for minors. Now, that's very concerning.
Wow. And see, I was not a big supporter of Dr. Oz either, but I did not know that last thing that I think many of the listeners will be interested to hear, that he was, pro-surgery for minors when it comes to transgenders. That is absolutely something that, again, if you start to put check marks by these people, you would say, how are they getting in the cabinet?
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty confusing. I mean, I'm sure all these people at one point in time were supporters of Trump, probably donating to his campaign. But I would think that he would use a little bit better discernment on some of these guys.
Yeah. What do you think about Jared Kushner's father-in-law and his ambassador appointment?
Yeah, and I don't know a whole lot about him. I know that Trump had pardoned him for something in the first term, but it does seem like Kushner family has a pretty big influence on Trump, and that might be something to keep an eye on.
Exactly. The Israel ambassador, I think, is a good pick.
Huckabee, yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Kristi Noem, Governor Noem, she was put in a position, it appears, to not have as much power as the border czar is going to have. I mean, even though she's above the border czar is pretty much going to be the person who's going to be handling immigration.
Yeah, it seems like it. And I don't think he has to have Senate confirmation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
maybe that's why that was a strategic pick there by Trump.
I would agree with you. Any others that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I'm not crazy about Marco Rubio, to tell you the truth, but I guess maybe he could come around too. Again, he was 100% for all the COVID narrative stuff, promoting the vaccine, the boosters, and all that. Certainly wasn't an ally of Donald Trump to begin with back in 2016. But, again, a lot of people have come around.
Well, it's kind of interesting. You just said something that's so important. If you start to look at the strings that are attached to President-elect Trump, many of these people were anti-Trump. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, anti-Trump. J.D. Vance, anti-Trump. Our U.S. Senator candidate, Bernie Moreno, anti-Trump, our new senator in Ohio. But look at his cabinet picks. I mean, Robert Kennedy was anti-Trump before he became pro-Trump. I mean, all of these people seem to have fallen into, not all of them, but a lot of them. I mean, even Kristi Noem, a lot of people aren't aware. In the early on, she was anti-Trump too. The only reason I know that is because I was in Washington and there was like 7 of us around the table who were pro-Trump, while everybody else was not at the table. And they were saying to us, "Why are you supporting Trump? He's a horrible person." Well, I don't remember Kristi Noem sitting at the table. I don't remember a lot of people sitting at the table who now say, "Oh, I was pro-Trump since he got involved." And look, I like Governor Noem. This isn't a negative on her, but what it's interesting is it shows, even Rubio, he was anti-Trump too. They all have seemed to now become part of his inner circle.
Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. It'd be really neat to see how this plays out. But it's like the lady that runs the Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom, Stephanie Stock, said that even if it's 40% of Trump's cabinet picks are pro health freedom, that is far and away above anything we could ever have imagined, even a year ago. So, hopefully it's going to make a big difference for health freedom, for freedom for everyone on every issue.
Well, the only reason I disagree with that comment is, remember that the 40% can be influenced by the 60% who are sitting around the table.
Yeah.
And in the end, what happens in Washington is you could have somebody who's pro-gun or pro, medical freedom, but when you're sitting around that cabinet table and 90% or 70% are against that issue, they're going to drown you out. So it's interesting. It's how Washington works. It's what people don't understand. You could send a senator down who's pro-medical freedom and say, "Wow, we won 1 Senate seat." Problem is, you got 99 other senators you have to convince. And actually, you got 50 other senators you have to convince, which is always the problem. So you could say, well, we're willing away at it, but you really got to have enough people there that it becomes part of the agenda. And my fear is that cabinet room, depending on who it's like, you start checking the box of how many people are anti-gun. Well, that'll be the sentiment of the cabinet room. How many people are, and I don't think people realize that. A cabinet position is a pretty important position because they sit around the table and they talk, and influence will drive movement and how things occur.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So let's focus on Southeast Ohio for a minute. A lot of talk early in the year was on the lack of job creation in Southeast Ohio. It seems like a lot of promises were made, then nothing. What are you seeing in the Appalachia, Ohio, and what will it take to bring real development down there?
Yeah. Well, you would have thought that with the now former Speaker of the House and Jason Stevens, that there would have been a lot more emphasis on this area, the southeastern part of Ohio, with Stevens being from Lawrence County, being a former county commissioner in Lawrence County. He came into that position with the help of Democrats, of course. So I don't think that having him in that powerful position really materialized into much for the voters in southeastern Ohio. But I think one of the things that Jason talked about long time ago was a connector bridge that would have been basically a connecting loop over to the Huntington, West Virginia area. And that would be huge for our region, Jim. And one of the reasons it's even more important now is because Nucor Steel has opened up right on the river in West Virginia, Cabell County, West Virginia, just north of Huntington. And their facility is huge. I mean, they're basically building a city north of Huntington, between Huntington and Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So it's right across the river from Lawrence County, Ohio, Gallia County, Ohio. This could be very, very big for the entire region. It will be, without a doubt. And so hopefully that connector bridge that has been talked about for a number of years, and we talked about, we call it the Chesapeake Bypass. And since the mid to late 80s, at least since I've been in this area, they've been talking about the completion of the Chesapeake Bypass. Never has materialized. You've got to have that. I don't think it would be a road or a bridge to nowhere. I think it would be one of those instances where if you build it, they will come. I think that's really what this region is waiting for. And I think that could make a big difference. Obviously, with Trump being back in the White House, opening up more drilling opportunities and fracking, I think those opportunities are definitely there for southeastern Ohio.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in business, I had 60 operations, and the only way that those operations became successful is I had to put them in a position of becoming, successful. I think the biggest problem in Ohio is that region, that southeast region, has never said, "Hey, this is a region that we're going to make great again." They are so concentrated in Columbus, in the Columbus area, and everybody will agree. If you live anywhere inside that beltway, you're in the greatest place in Ohio. But people seem to forget about all the other areas of Ohio that are important, that are just dying, like Steubenville and other communities all around our great state that really need to have a concentrated effort in moving them forward.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And it's always been promised during campaign season, but it never comes to fruition.
Yeah. So let's finish with this. Other than the presidential race, give me your one big surprise story of 2024. And what is one big thing you're looking for in 2025?
Well, we already kind of hit on it with Bobby Kennedy Jr. So, him dropping out of the presidential race and then having this alliance with Trump, I think that was a huge surprise. It was a huge, I think it'll go down in history as one of the biggest movements in presidential campaign history. And the reason is, and like I said, I'm a medical freedom guy. So I was calling for this to be one of the top topics for 2024, long time ago. And it really wasn't until RFK Jr. joined the Trump team. And then they started talking about making America healthy again and so forth. And it really forced Trump's hand, I believe, to do what a lot of people in the MAGA movement wanted him to do. And so despite the inconsistencies with some of these cabinet appointments and some of the pro-lockdown people that he's put in there, I think that the HHS secretary position for RFK Jr. is going to make a huge difference. Big Pharma and Big Ag are going to be fighting all the way. I mean, there's going to be a lot of battles, legal battles and more, throughout 2025 and throughout this Trump administration. But I'm hoping that in 2025, we'll start seeing some steps into really seriously making America healthy again. And I think it starts with exposing what happened with Big Pharma, what happened with Fauci, and things like that. The people that hate this appointment of Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if he can get through. By the way, and I don't know this, so I'm going to ask you: was Kennedy a? I know he was pro medical freedom and did not support the vaccines, but did he support the lockdowns?
No, not that I know of. I don't really recall where he was on some of those early things in 2020. But certainly his organization, Children's Health Defense Network, they have pointed out the fallacies of the lockdowns, the masking of children and so forth. They pointed out how that actually hurt childhood development. It hurt kids in school, and more importantly, what this has done. With the focus on the COVID vaccine, it has opened up a lot of people's eyes, doctors I'm talking about, who were never anti-vax whatsoever. They gave out the childhood immunizations. Now they are looking at what Bobby Kennedy Jr. has been pointing out for several years, the tie-in with these 70-some, 80-some childhood vaccinations to some of the childhood diseases that we have, lifelong chronic diseases. And I think it's too big to ignore. And I think that's why Big Pharma is so nervous right now.
You know, it's interesting. And they asked, I don't know, there was a special where they asked Bobby Kennedy Jr., would you have come on board with Trump if the Democrat Party would allowed you to be part of their primary? And he answered it by saying no, he would not have come on board with Trump. So what's amazing is because the Democrat Party did not allow him in the Democrat game, he left the Democrat Party, ran as an independent, saw that was not going to work, and then realized, hey, maybe this is how I can get my agenda fixed. Mm-hmm. And he moved over to the Trump team. I got to wonder how many people that we've talked about in the last 20 or 25 minutes have made that shift, like a Tulsi Gabbard, like others, just because they weren't getting anywhere in the Democrat Party, realized the independents weren't going to be their direction. So they jumped on this Trump bandwagon. It should be interesting. Now, what I've said all along is normally, and we'll see, 2 years from now, normally when a president takes over and does some of the strong things that President Trump is going to do, and by the way, I support many of them, but normally the American people reject the House and Senate 2 years later and put that president back in a box. It'll be interesting to see what happens in 2 years. I guess we'll all live it and we'll find out. Do you have any thoughts there?
Well, I think it's pretty likely. So that means you got to hit the ground running here. I mean, you've got 2 years. And, remember, when Trump was elected in 2016, he had 2 years with Republicans in the majority in the House and the Senate and did not repeal Obamacare. Republicans in the House, what was the vote? Like 60 some times when Obama was president to repeal Obamacare. It was what Rush Limbaugh used to call symbolism over substance because they knew it wasn't going to happen. And then they get Trump in there and they have the majorities and they don't do it. I understand there were some people who fought against it, even within the party. The other thing was the Planned Parenthood. Remember, Planned Parenthood being exposed for selling baby body parts. We're still funding Planned Parenthood.
Exactly.
So the opportunities were missed on some promises in the first 2 years of the first Trump administration. He cannot make that mistake this time.
Well, I sent Vivek Ramaswamy a text, and I said, be careful of the criticism of some of the programs that have existed ongoing forever, because some of those programs existed in the 4 years that President Trump-elect was president, because it's hard to eliminate some of that stuff. And you're right. I served during those years where we had the majority in the House and the Senate, and we had President Trump there. And then, quite frankly, we lost the majority in 2018, starting in 2019, because the American people thought we went too far. But we didn't go far enough, which is part of the problem.
Right. Yep, exactly. You got to do it while you can.
Right. So it'll be interesting. Look, Tom, I appreciate you being on the program. We got through a lot of stuff today, including discussion on some of these picks. It'll be interesting. One last thing that I'll tell you to watch out for. You know, I'm still a believer that Senator McConnell did not step down from leadership. Usually at that age, you step down and then you leave. He stepped down, but he didn't leave. I'm a firm believer that him and Murkowski and the other woman,
Collins,
and the other senator that Trump tried to remove, I know it was in Georgia, maybe it was South Carolina, that he was opposed to him. Those are 4 votes that are going to be very critical, that everything that Trump tries to get accomplished through these appointments. It'll be interesting to see how those 4 people vote, because none of them, President Trump will be gone before they're ever up for re-election. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, that's you're exactly right to point that out. So they hopefully will feel the pressure to get on board.
Well, we'll see. It'll be an interesting 2 years. Again, thank you for being on. I enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to maybe talking to you again in the future as the year moves on.
Same here, Jim. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Well, again, I want to thank you all for watching. It's interesting, the guests we have, the perspectives they have, which I think is important, whether it's on appointments, whether it's on legislation. All of this is what makes the Buckeye War Room a valuable resource to those that want to hear all sides of the issue. So again, thank you for watching. This is Jim Renacci signing off on this episode of the Buckeye War Room.